welcome to the Hail to the King podcast. This is Magnus. I'm here with
Mark.
And today we're going to talk about Misery. I actually picked this book, or suggested it, based on, kind of the winter theme and, the idea of me and Mark here, we've been talking about kind of writing and inspiration to write, and it just seemed like it fit the shoe, fit the bill, fit the foot, however you want to.
It fit some sort of object
in
like which you can fit things.
It fit like a glove.
Like a glove.
Like a glove. Anyways, the story of this one, for those who don't know, a brief summary is this one is about a writer who finishes his most recent book, which he considers to be his masterpiece. He then gets in a car accident, and the person who ends up saving him is his biggest fan, but she's a crazy person. And it turns out that she reads that a book of his comes out, and it turns out that he kills off the main character in the series that she's in love with. She's named a pig after the main girl, Misery Chastain.
Yep.
So her pig is named Misery. She loves the Misery so much. And while she's taking care of him and nursing him back to health, the most recent book comes out where he killed off Misery. And so she is furious, and she demands that he write a sequel where he brings her back from the dead and does it fairly. The rest of the book, what happens throughout is his Misery creating this book and Misery dealing with his circumstance. Brief summary. Anyways.
And I think it's important to state that she is psychopath as well as a serial killer.
Oh yeah.
Who just hasn't been caught.
Yeah, there's a point in the book where he escapes his room whenever he can, his hospital bed, as he's getting stronger and whatever. He escapes in a little wheelchair, and he kind of does some spelunking through her house.
Yeah.
And just kind of to discover more about her and try to find ways to escape. It turns out that she's cut the phone lines, or she doesn't have a phone. I can't remember what it was. But anyways, he discovers this scrapbook, and it's filled with pages of people dying in like obituaries. And it turns out that she's a nurse, and she worked in a hospital, several hospitals.
Yeah.
And she kind of goes from place to place, just like mercy killing people or killing them if she thinks they need killing. Poor things, right? Yeah. Little poor little things. And at one point, while he's going through this scrapbook, he sees that she has it's a bunch of birth announcements. So she gets switched to like a nursery. She's the nursery nurse.
Yeah.
Right?
She's the head nurse of a...
What is it called?
Oh my
birthing
gosh. Yeah.
Whatever. The birthing
where people
department.
Go to have the babies.
Yes. And so she's a baby killer too, amongst all of her other, deeds, nefarious deeds. But one thing that was cool that I liked was the themes regarding Scheherazade and the 1001 Nights.
Yeah.
Like, basically, after he kills off the main character in this Misery series that she loves so much, he has to write to stay alive. He has to write to not make her angry. There's a point in the book where she cuts off his thumb because she was frustrated and mad because... Oh, that brings us to the typewriter. So, in the book, she gets him a typewriter, and the letters are like falling off. I think it starts with no N's.
Yeah, it's no N's first, and then T's, and I think E's.
Yeah, and when one of the letters goes, he tells her about it, and she goes to the other room, grabs what she needs to amputate his thumb, just out of frustration, I guess.
It's her way of getting back at him, even though it wasn't his fault. He was just, he's a writer. He needs a typewriter that works. It was just her way of being upset with him.
But yeah, writing to stay alive. It's like a desperation. And I'm sure that it's a little melodramatic, like to think about writers saying, "Oh man, my work is so important that I need to write to stay alive."
Yeah, and then King took this to another level, and one of his characters actually has to write to stay alive, and she doesn't let him loose, or she doesn't let him get off easy.
Mm-hmm.
What Magnus said earlier is he has to write fair. So it really has to be a good story that makes sense, because she is, as she styles herself, his #1 fan.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows a crap load about his books at this point.
She's kind of like the the Calvins from the Dark Tower series.
Yeah.
She's just like obsessive fan over this Misery series.
And so
the scene where she's talking about the old film serials, like the little short adventure films that would play in the movie theater when she was a kid, like the little adventure, the heroes headed down a cliff. Rocket Man, yeah. And that scene in the movie version, when Kathy Bates, I rewatched the movie version before I read the book, kind of switched things up instead of reading the book then going to the movie. I decided to watch the movie first and then read the book. Anyways, Kathy Bates in the scene, she starts off like telling the story of going to these movies with her brother, I think, and just she starts off kind of calm and whatever, and as she's talking about the cock-a-doodie car, I can't remember what the exact line is, but she gets so crazy. And I think I remember watching that scene in like a highlights reel for like Oscars, because Kathy Bates actually won an Oscar for her portrayal of what's her name?
Annie Wilkes.
Annie Wilkes, and she definitely deserved it. Like you haven't seen that movie yet, right?
Which I was thinking. I think, and I talked to you earlier about this.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking it might be fun. I haven't seen the movie, but I have read the books. I think this is my second or third go-around with the book, which I had a good time reading it.
And you're interested in that movie.
And so, yeah, I was thinking of watching, we were thinking of watching the movie, so you could see our faces, and while we watch the movie, see kind of our reaction, and we'll give a running...
Almost like a commentary track.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do, is kind of a running commentary,
We're
Might be something interested. If viewers, if you guys are interested in that, let us know. But yeah,
we'll make something with that, because some of this is one of those rare Stephen King movies that's actually, worth something. I would rank it in the top five Stephen King movies. So I think Rob Reiner directed it. He also, he did a lot of like 80s and 90s like family type movies. I think he did Princess Bride.
Okay.
So he's got a sense of showmanship and everything. But James Caan plays
he plays
Paul Sheldon. And he does amazing. It was funny because I actually recently watched Elf, where James Caan is Will Ferrell's dad.
And all you could think of was Misery.
And it was hard. Yeah, when I watched Misery, I would just see him, his interactions with Buddy the elf, and remember that. So it's kind of fun. But yeah.
So something that so after reading this was like I said, the second or third time reading it, I noticed a lot of interesting things. It's interesting there, Paul and Annie's relationship. She has him on a ton of painkillers, and he becomes reliant. He becomes addicted to the painkillers that she gives him, to the point that he goes through, mild withdrawals every time she kind of leaves for extended periods. And he goes through these withdrawals, and it's interesting, the first time I read it, I kind of saw him as going through the withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
But really, they are codependent,
Yeah.
She is his supplier for drugs.
And he
is her supplier for, drugs, but in a different form. The story.
Yeah. And
I thought that was pretty interesting.
I think I can't remember if it's a quote or if I just heard it somewhere, But when asked about this book, Stephen King says it was about his drug addictions, like his cocaine, I think specifically, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But I know he was kind of into some fun drugs in a certain period of time in his life, and this was kind of his story about his addiction, kind of personifying his misery with that addiction. So
I could.
I'm again, if anybody knows the exact story, cool. I'll try to look it up as well if I'm way wrong or anything. But I'm pretty sure that's something I heard. Anyways, that there was a quote in I think it's the beginning of the book, or maybe one of the first parts or the second part, but it was when you look into the abyss and the abyss looks into you.
That is.
Or if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you.
Here, I got it right here.
You got it ready?
Let me pull this out. And this is a famous quote by Friedrich Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
When you look into the abyss also looks into you.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very appropriate because, well, at least I would think. In a lot of ways, Annie's the abyss.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Paul's kind of where he has to go to write, because his life is on the line, in this the mental state he has to put himself to write. It's almost like looking into the abyss. He's kind of going into a dark place to write this book, to a painful place.
I know one thing that was cool is the pilings. Like, he talks about the pilings and the
tide.
The tide of the ocean. I had completely forgotten about that this time around, and then I watched the movie, which doesn't mention the pilings or anything like that. But yeah, that was a really cool visual, like a way to visualize pain,
And it starts out as just pain, like it's like the tide coming in, the tide going back, in and out is, kind of reflecting the pain that he's going through this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But then it switches over to Annie's insanity. She goes through these periods of manic joy down to periods of manic depression where she, I'm going to amputate a foot because I want to hobble you. And so that's kind of what I see, is it goes from pain, but then it goes to Annie's, joy, cycles of joy and depression.
I liked her laughing place. Like, picturing the laughing place. It's like, what is Annie's laughing place really like? And what is she like when she's there? Does she go there and just do like our crazy end of the podcast maniacal laughter? What does she do,
I think she screams.
She screams? Yeah. And, maybe it's this, kind of army of darkness screaming that turns into laughter, misery, like...
So,
yeah. Did
you watch the latest season of Daredevil with Bullseye?
I have not yet. No.
Okay. I'm not going to give anything away.
Yeah.
If there may be spoilers. Oh, by the way, FYI, there's spoilers here.
Yeah, for Misery.
We should have said it at the start. Anyways, third season of Daredevil, they do a really good job of fleshing out one of the main antagonists, Bullseye. I forget his name, but I thought there was I don't know, when I thought of her laughing place, it made me think of Daredevil. Bullseye in they don't call him Bullseye. I can't remember his name.
Has he not gained that name yet?
He hasn't gained that name.
Yeah, I
but
like
he
that.
is.
Colin Farrell in
he's posing.
old movie.
We will not talk about that.
Does he have a bullseye on his forehead yet?
No, he's not. Stop it.
Okay.
Stop it. No. The movie that shall not be named among, superhero movies, comic book community. Anyways. But in that, Wilson Fisk tells Bullseye something. He's like, something I think will help you kind of channel your anger. And I watched this a couple months ago, so I may be getting, totally wrong. But from what I remember, it's like, channeling your anger. And sometimes you need to let it
the
out.
steam.
Let it out, you know, just to stay sane. And so there's a couple scenes where Bullseye's character goes into an ambulance, just in an ambulance, shuts the doors, and then screams in rage and pain and everything. And you can see in those moments his insanity coming out, and then he's able to cope a little better with the outside world. That's what I think of when I think of Annie's laughing place. She goes there to let out all the insanity in screams, laughs, whatever it may be.
Exorcise the demons.
Cock-a-doodie exercise.
Cock-a-doodie demons.
Which, isn't it the funniest?
No, I thought it was really interesting
dialogue?
because one of the things that she says is people don't really talk like that. People don't really go down to the store and say, "Get me some, you know, son of a bitch,
effing
whatever," and
manure.
Yeah. and it's funny because in the end of the book, when the crap hits the fan, and she's fighting Paul, she starts swearing, and she's real swearing. She's not saying cock-a-doodie and whatever. So it's like it kind of returns back to that, you know, the theme of, or her what she said earlier with people don't really say that in, you know, situations, and she's actually doing that. That's what gets her to the end, is when her life is on the line. But it's funny with the cop and with the cops and whatever. Like, she kind of keeps her cool and doesn't really freak out. But at the end, when everything,
it's almost like she is throughout the whole thing, unless she's in her laughing place and unless she is amputating something off of Paul.
Oh yeah.
No, editing
Yeah.
something off. You know, editing his body, which I thought was so
weird. Yeah, like
so beautiful.
Yeah, like oh man, it's one thing to mention is the in the book she cuts off his foot with an axe. Is it only one? It's 1 foot, right?
Yeah, it's just one.
And in the movie, the famous scene that plays Moonlight Sonata.
Yeah.
And she puts a block of wood between his legs, and she breaks his ankles with a sledgehammer.
I almost feel that's worse.
You know, it's there's no blood. It's crazy that there's just no blood, you know, but it does more for cringeworthiness and whatever than the idea of chopping off a leg with an axe. Like, yeah, I'm sure that would have been blood. Like, the scene in the book is like bloody. I think he's talking about the blood spraying everywhere,
yeah.
And I mean, he describes that she cuts through to the bone, but then the muscle of the leg on the back is the only thing kind of holding the leg together till her second chop. Like, that's pretty gross.
Ugh.
You know, the idea of having a body part severed at the bone and just the skin dangling is kind of the only thing.
Having it flap around a little bit.
Ugh. But yeah, I mean, that's brutal, but the scene in the movie does such a good job of PG-13ing it, you know? I think it's a rated R movie, but that scene is surprisingly not rated R. Like, I think the only it gets, again, right at the end of the movie when they're fighting, when they're having their little battle to the death.
Yeah.
There's some swearing, but before that there really isn't any.
Huh.
Like, it's a pretty mild.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it's a pretty mild movie up to the very end, and it gets a little bloody too. You know, like, it's good stuff.
Well,
There's a scene that's I made a post about it, but there's a part that's straight out of Evil Dead and Army of Darkness where he looks over at her and she's like totally dead, and he like kind of looks like he wants to, you know, he doesn't trust that she's really dead. And again, the book kind of does that in his inner monologue, but yeah, he kind of starts to crawl away, and then it comes and gets him from behind. You know, Annie wakes up and is not actually dead. The classic horror movie, you know, is, are they dead? Are they not dead? Check them, you know, do the double tap.
Yep.
You know, and so I like that. It reminds me of old Sam Raimi Evil Dead. Anyways.
anything having to do with Army of Darkness, Evil Dead.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong.
Hail to the king, baby.
Hail to the king, baby.
No, I thought it was, with her being dead, or not dead, I thought it was interesting how he refers to her as the goddess.
The goddess.
You know, how she can't die. He even warns warns the cops that come to save him eventually.
David and Goliath.
Beware, yeah, David and Goliath.
Why was he calling me David? I don't know.
He even warns them, like, beware the goddess. Like, he's so terrified of her, and then he faints when they go and look for her in the room that he says she's locked in, and she's not actually there, and he's just like, oh, she's alive!
Yeah.
So that's where I think they get that, you know.
There's a character in Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, who's called Reek, and he's this guy who gets he's a prince. He's a prince of the Iron Islands, and he goes on this mission to, you know, basically he gets taken captive by this guy who pretty much abuses him psychologically, kind of more so, you know, to the same level as Annie Wilkes and Paul Sheldon, where he kind of becomes her prisoner, and this Reek character becomes this guy's prisoner to the point where it's like he could run away, but he won't run away because if he tries, then the punishment happens, you know? It's like, and he holds his captor in a sense of like supernatural, on a supernatural level where they'll find out, you know, I can't do anything, they'll find out. There's even a scene, kind of the famous, you know, someone shaving someone else, and it's the ultimate power move where you get your enemy to shave you, and they won't kill you because, you know, it's like an old gang mobster movie. Imagine like the Godfather, like sitting there having one of his enemies shave his neck because he knows that if he did anything that he would be dead before, you know, it wouldn't be worth it, you know, and maybe it's some sort of trick. If he goes for it and goes for the jugular to shave, you know, to kill him, that'll be the point, you know. You get what I'm saying, right?
I get what you're saying, and that you're...
Maybe I veered away. Maybe it would make a little more sense to you if you knew the character. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But for those listening, he kind of becomes Reek, Paul Sheldon.
He's under the spell.
The spell of the supernatural god or goddess. You know?
where she has gained kind of deific powers.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's fun. And he doesn't lose hope. That's it's kind of neat, kind of interesting. He does make it out on his own. We talked about 1408, where the writer in there almost accidentally saves himself. You know, Mike Enslin, he accidentally saves himself by lighting the match, but Paul, he sees the two cops who he dubs David and Goliath, and he does not call out to them, not just because, like, one of the, you know, the surface thoughts is, oh, I'm not going to call out to them because, man, if it's them against the goddess, there's a 50-50 that she'll take them down. But it's also because he has hope that he will take her down. He's like, no, they're going to put her in jail forever.
Wants to kill her.
But they're not going to do what I want to do. I want to take the goddess down myself. Yep. And so I kind of like that there's still this little heroic part in this shell of a man.
Yeah. The one thing that was cool is when he starts writing for her, starts writing this book, he's doing it for her, and then by the end he realizes that he's doing it for himself. And the act of writing is making him stronger and giving him that hope that he could get out of this situation. You know, like, it's cool. You know, he kind of uses his writing to escape his misery, you know?
Yeah.
And it helps give him strength to come out of it. There's a quote, I think, in the beginning of the book, and it's, this may not be verbatim, but it's, writing does not cause misery, it is born of misery.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool. I mean, you even think about Stephen King when he started writing. He was barely able to pay the bills. He, you know, I think he worked in like a school. He was like an underpaid teacher, you know, English teacher, writing teacher. I think he even worked in like a laundromat, or maybe his wife did. But it's like, you know, he kind of had a rough time growing up, rough life.
Yeah.
And, you know, you see what he's made of that, you know. And I'm sure a lot of his writing initially was kind of retellings of his own misery translated into some of the characters. and it's like life experience, which you could say just life itself can be misery because there's always bad things happening. There's joyous points, but life can be hard, and being able to turn that into something that you can use to either make yourself happy and get you through a hard situation through storytelling, coming up, creating, or even financially. Stephen King was able to start his career right. He wrote a lot in his younger days as well, but he was able to turn that talent, kindle that flame, that misery. So
No,
it's a way cool theme. I didn't think that this book would be as much about writing and writer's block and just the storytelling process as much as it was. It's really inspiring if you're looking for a good, if you're struggling wanting to write. There's On Writing, which is really good, Dance Macabre, and this one. I would say those three are his best books about writing.
No, I would agree. Like after reading Misery, yeah, you want it, like you're inspired, even if you're not the creative type of person to write something. You kind of feel like, oh man, I could do this, which not a bad thing, not a bad feeling to be inspired to go and do something awesome.
And maybe part of it is just we got to find our Annie Wilkes, that thing that kind of that drive to write, that misery that can push us forward, and I think a lot of people can relate with, like let's say my Annie Wilkes is just wanting to write. I want to write. I feel like I've got some good stories in me, and maybe someday I will. And that's what I keep saying to myself, but I don't actually do it. I got to find that Annie Wilkes to chop off my leg and just force me at the typewriter. Yeah, and I'm still looking for my Annie Wilkes, but it's a weird way of looking at it. It's a weird way of looking at it, and you find that thing to drive you forward, and then you can turn it into a strength. It's just it's cool. I like that. And a lot of rappers, you don't have the cred unless you grew up poor.
Yeah.
It's like those are the guys who are able to rise up out of the slums and whatever. They're the ones who have the credit. It's like it's cool having success / happiness / fulfillment through going through these hard situations. It's cool. I like it.
I love it.
It's an inspiring book. It's very inspiring.
No, it's a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, and
it's dark.
It's only like 300 pages too, so it's really short.
Yeah, it's a shorter one. Let me check.
Yeah, I think it was like 310 pages.
310.
Damn.
Exactly.
310. I knew I'd
exactly.
Seen that. Anyways, but yeah.
No, it's a fun book. Really, if anyone wanted to read this as their first Stephen King, it's it'd be a good first.
It's a really good first
Stephen
one. My sister-in-law up in Seattle, she in December she had called me or texted me and asked me what I want to read a Stephen King book. Where should I start? What's a good recommendation?
And you said Misery?
I told her Misery.
Nice.
I'm like, A, you get to read a great book. B, you get to watch a sweet movie afterwards, and C, you'll get to listen to our episode when we record it. So I'm like, boom, triple play,
Yep.
So shout out to you, Kristen. I hope you enjoyed it before you listen to this episode, hopefully. But anyways,
no, it's a good book. Yeah. Oh, as far as I thought this was interesting. Dark Tower connections to wrap it up. So let's see, is it Wolves of the Kala, or is it the end of Wizard and Glass? We'll see. It's either at the end of Wizard and Glass. I think it's in the start of Wolves of the Kala. Roland and his group of gunslingers, Eddie, Susanna, Jake, and Oi. They encounter these bees
Oh yeah, the bees.
And they
Not
go,
the bees.
They go,
Not the bees.
They go to find the bees, thinking, hey, let's have ourselves a nice little dessert for tonight's dinner.
Mm-hmm.
They go and they find them, and they are
honey.
these albino bees. I don't think they are exactly like the ones in Misery.
But it was kind of a neat little.
It seems
it's
there's
hard
a little
not
connection.
to think. Yeah, it's hard not to think about the bees when you know about the bees, right? Yeah. So I think sometimes it seems like Stephen King does that, where he'll name characters with like similar last names or similar names. You'll be reading about one, and it kind of makes you think of an old Stephen King book, and you're like, oh yeah, that one guy has the same last name.
Yeah.
And then you think about that story. It's just kind of a fun little subtle nod to one of his other books, right?
And there is the reference to The Shining, to the hotel.
Oh
that
yeah, the
burns
hotel
down.
overlook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that reference.
It's in Colorado. I
Yeah.
don't know if I needed to mention that. I think I did. I probably didn't.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
We'll get to that one eventually. But hope you guys enjoyed this.
Real quick.
No.
I wanted to shout out to Canto 1408 for getting my post. I posted an Instagram picture of 9 author characters from Stephen King books, like author protagonists, and he got 100%. He even got my trick question. I have Stephen King in the middle, and basically he was saying Stephen King was the character from The Dark Tower. Yep. So he even named the book that he was from. And I also have Richard Bachman down there.
So you sent me a text about this. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh shoot!
I know.
I ruined the surprise.
No. I got these two.
Okay, yeah.
Let's see. I don't remember the names.
We're gonna go upper left.
Upper left to right. There's the Bag of
columns. Yeah.
Bag of Bones character, played by James Bond guy. I forget
Pierce
his name.
Brosnan.
Yep, Pierce. Bill Denbrough. From there.
From It.
Secret Window guy.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. Don't know him. Gonna say that now.
Oh, he's from.
There's Callahan.
He's from the Dark Half.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read that one yet.
That's a good one.
Which we'll get to that eventually.
Oh,
There's Callahan.
Close. Not Callahan, but
really?
He's the writer.
I never imagined him with blonde hair.
Yeah, that movie was filmed from Salem's Lot.
Okay, then that's Mark from Salem's Lot. Great name. There's Paul Sheldon, Richard Bachman, and Mike Enslin.
Mike Enslin, yep. And we've got the names. You can go look at his post. But yeah, thanks for commenting. You got 100% and you did it faster than anyone else. It was awesome.
You get 5 Dark Tower.
You win 5 Dark Tower dollars
from Hail to the King podcast.
But yeah, I liked his username at 1408 Canto 1408. I'm like, that can't be a coincidence. He loves Stephen King. Anyways, I'm glad that seemed to maybe be his favorite story. But anyways, cool. Anyways, I think we're going to announce what we're reading next, right?
Yeah, so we're going to do the latest Stephen King. It's a shorter book. I think it is a novel.
It might count as a novella.
Like Elevation.
Elevation. So that came out in the fall, and we did not read it for wanting to save it for this podcast.
Just to get you guys excited, we are going to start a journey through the Dark Tower.
Mm-hmm. This year will be it. We're going to do it.
We're going to do a journey through the Dark Tower. For everybody, just so you know, it's not going to be
a marathon.
Books 1 through, well, now there is 8.
Yeah.
Books 1 through 8. We're not going to do it that way. We're going to do, say book 1 and then do a couple stories that kind of relate and almost, they almost add some commentary to the previous story or the coming story. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way we're going to do it, but we will start with the Dark Tower here in the near future, maybe after Elevation.
Yeah, and for instance, kind of give you an idea, we might read book 4 of the Dark Tower, Wizard and Glass, and then either before or maybe after book 5 we could do like Salem's Lot, for instance. Oh. It's like you'll want to know who Father Callahan is. We could introduce him before book 5 or after book 5. I don't know if you have a preference, but anyways, that's kind of what we're saying is we're going to do books that kind of have kind of references to or might fit alongside.
Pretty
the
strong references to the
journey.
Dark Tower.
So, anyways.
Yeah, just remember to follow us on Instagram. Check us out on YouTube. It is in the works that we're going to actually go to iTunes and other podcast platforms.
Get our podcast legit podcast instead of just
so we can be
YouTube
real
channel.
boys.
Yeah.
Someday we'll be real boys.
We'll be real boys soon.
And yeah, remember guys, there are other worlds than these.